was terrified to go in them Spurs. There was knives plotted everywhere right in them days. So I kept on with the music. The guy come back down again, who was a friend of Fred Lowe's, used to have it with him, and said, look, mate, really, that music, can you turn the music down? So, come out, the black guy, big knife, blood, this, that, waving it around, right? So the guy, he said, all right, mate, no worries, right? Of course, the next time they come down, Sean, they'd plotted it all up. And Fred Lowe, being the unassuming killer that he is, they knew that this guy had come out and make a big scene with the knives like he did before. So they got Fred Lowe to go the other side of his cell. Then they went to the cell. They got him out of the cell, again, about the music, and said something. Of course, the guy come out, didn't it, with the knife. What, you want to have it, this, that, and the other. Fred Lowe was there, of course. So, as soon as he put his hand up, this black guy, he was a dread Sean as well, right? And he was a fit lump. He was a physical guy. Fred Lowe grabbed his arm, and the other guy went straight in. Bang, 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 bang. Took him straight out. This black guy had his guts in his hands, Sean. So, he was teabagged, really. Just like that. It happened so fast, this stuff, Sean, right? Went into a cell, the black guy, to, he's holding his guts in. And he died in there, Sean. Died in there. Dead, that was it. They closed the door, whatever, and he died in there, the guy.
Was there any consequences for Fred Lowe for doing that?
Yeah, there was. You see, the thing about, there was two of them, right? And I'm not mentioning the other guy's name, right? But it was about, regardless of what people think, there's too many people who will grass in prison, or even out here, Sean. So, of course, it went back what it was and what it weren't. So it wasn't long, a few months after, they was nicked for that murder. And then there was a trial a couple of years after. Fred Lowe was given another life for that murder. So that was his third murder inside. Of course, he's one of the most dangerous prisoners in the system. He's killed 3 people. A lot more dangerous than Charlie Bronson, Sean, who hasn't killed anyone, you would say. And of course, he'll never get out again. He's just one of these guys.
And if you pass Fred Lowe on the street, would you not think twice?
You really wouldn't, Sean. He's that kind of guy. And that's the reason why I put Fred. There are so many of these guys. But he really is unique in that sense. He actually looks like a sex offender, Sean. He's got the big, thick milk bottle glasses, really quietly spoken, beard, unassuming, kind of fidgety. Quiet guy in the corner, looks like a 2 and 8. He really does, So yeah, you'd never think it. Very, very dangerous guy.
Do you know why he came to prison in the first place?
I think it was something to do with violence for him, but it wasn't a big charge. And of course, he kept murdering people when he was away. So he's never going to be released.
So the next one then was the Liberian.
Ferdinand Lieveld. Yeah, he's another one. Memorable character that sticks in the memory. He left Liberia because of the war over there. Come over here, big black guy, very dark. He was got a job as a bouncer. Ended up killed someone on the door of a club in the West End. I mean, he ripped this guy with a knife, machete, from here up to his neck, right? Gets life for murder. That was just the start of it for him. He was the one who threw boiling hot oil over a screw in Whitemore. And had 3 trials for it and got not guilty on it.
What had the screw done to provoke?
The screw was, he was a bit of a dog in there, Sean. He really was. He was a real target. He used to cause a lot of problems, right? So he's well known, and he picked on the wrong one at the wrong time there, right, which happens. But the thing about Ferdinand Lieveld, there's many stories about these characters, but here's one that sticks in the mind. Because he stabbed a few of my pals in there and he was really wanted. He was a big target, right? This guy, he used to walk around with a PP9 in a sock down his trousers or whatever. But he used to always have this tissue box in his hand. I was thinking, I even thought, why does this guy always walk around with a tissue box? Of course, he had a knife in there underneath the thing, big knife, right? That was the reason why. But I was in Long Lartin, Sean, and I'll never forget it. He's in there in the TV room, so it's TV room, you know, it's kind of bigger than your normal TV rooms in prison. A lot of kind of chairs in there. There was about 8 of us in there. One evening, because he was a bully, this Ferdinand Lefeld, he'd bully people, and the younger ones or the weaker ones, he thought he'd get away with it. And he was bullying this Scouse guy, this younger Scouse guy. So, you know, everyone is firmed up in them places. You know yourself, they're on the food boat, Sean. You know, the gangs in there, the Londoners, the Scousers, the Manx. You know, you'd stick to your own. They'd protect each other. You eat together. You train together. So, of course, you know, he picked on the wrong one here. So they come, didn't they? Hit squad. I'm sitting in the room, Sean. I hear bang, the door goes. I see them all come in, ballied up, right? 4 of them. Hit squad, right? They got knives, right? One of them's got a little pot of boiling hot oil. So they're coming for Leveld, right? And of course, he sees it. So they give it to him with the oil, right? And I can remember to see him after, all his jumper and all that had been melted into his hand where they kind of got him here, right? That was just the start of it. You know, of course, they're on him like a pack of wolves, Sean, right? And he's a dangerous guy, this Leveld. So he stands up to try and defend himself. But they're too fast for him, Sean. They mean business. They have to take this guy out off the wing, right? So they're on him, all around him, stabbing him, moving around him. And they get him. They get through, like they get him. You know, they're too fast, too quick, too many of them, right? You know, and they mean business, right? He goes down on one leg, Sean. And they was just on him. You know, he got stabbed in the neck. He got stabbed about 15 times in there, right? They took him out. And it was crazy. You know, I see this kind of stuff a few times, but I see a hit squad come like that, Sean, in, do that, out, gone, is really something. You're like, you know what I mean? And, yeah, he died, you know, twice on the way to hospital, but lived again, this guy. This guy was a guy, he really had 10 lives, this guy.
Did he try and get revenge on those guys when he came back?
Sean, the thing about them days, high security prisons, as you know, when people make a move on you like that, you're not coming back. Mm. You're either dead, brown bread, but you're going off the wing, hospital case, and that's because, you know, there's too much stuff going on. You can't be trusted. You know, whatever it is, you know, you need to go. So, you know, you won't be coming back on the wing. Maybe you catch these people in another prison much later if you live to tell the tale. But, you know, he had a lot of enemies. He was one guy in the system over a lot of years who was notorious, who had a lot of enemies.
Why was he stabbing so many people in the first place?
I'll tell you what it was, Sean, with him. He stabbed, you know, a friend of mine, Charlie McGee, who was a really well-known London armed robber, right, with other people. Charlie died in there, you know, of heart disease, right? But he was a very well-known guy. And Ferdinand was in Brixton Unit at the start of his sentence with Charlie McGee, and they kind of fell out, and he stabbed Charlie. Not a good start. So Charlie was a really well-known, respected guy in the system. So this carried all the way through with him, and then it was that tit for tat. And
fell out over what?
I'm not quite sure what it was. Something stupid, Sean. You know, something stupid. He said something or whatever, and they fell out.
Yeah.
But he stabbed Charlie, right? You know, he stabbed Charlie, right? And you know, that was the worst thing to do. You know.
All right, next one. We're going over to Charles Bronson and the story of John Steed.
Another one, memorable one. And of course, look, with Charlie, there's so much in the press about me and Charlie. You know, so many interviews and all that. Of course, I knew Charlie very well. I was in the cages with Charlie. When they built Woodhill Close Supervision Centre, they spent $15 million on that. It was based on Marion in the States that has the most disruptive prisoners that they couldn't manage. Charlie was the 8th selected for that. I was the 9th. You know, it's still there today, a crazy place, right? So Charlie, you know, I was in a few places with Charlie, but it was always segregation or units because of our kind of category and what was going on. This was in Full Sutton, you know, another dispersal up in York. you know, we're down there about 4 months, me and Charlie. But when I first got there, right, next door to me there was another Cat A. You know, you see the red A on the thing, you say, okay, you know, it must be a serious case, this guy. You know, anyway, I'm in this cell, Sean. You know, and you talk to people through the pipe or through the window. So he knocks on the thing, this guy. And he says, hey, you know, this guy talks to me. Now, I'm, you know, kind of guarded. I said, you know, like, who are you, mate? And, you know, you want to find out who these people are, right, before you get into it with them. So he says, I always wanted to be like you. You know, he has a London accent, this guy. I think, what's this guy talking about? Yeah, I always, you know, was a bit of a villain. But then I kind of went on and, like, I killed a girl, you know what I mean, because she didn't obey me. You know, and I was a rapist. I said, you fucking what? That's what I said to him. I couldn't believe. I mean, I said, seen you. I said, you wrong. And I said, look, don't, oh, mine ain't with that pipe, right? Don't bang on that wall. I said, you fucking beast, right? And that was it. That was the first engagement with this guy anyway. Because you'd send a line out, you know, you send a line out to get things down, Sean, whatever it was, bit of food, bit of, you know, snack or whatever it was in them days. He kept throwing things over our line to hook the papers in because no one had talked to him because he was a very, very bad case. So, you know, I'm there with Charlie, a few other people were there, and we'd be, you know, we'd talk for hours. Charlie's got so many stories, right? You know, about Broadmoor, like, I'm in stitches, but we talk for hours, really, right? And more about that, some really exclusive stuff, you know, of course, on September the 2nd, Kingston, London as well. But, this went on for a little while, and I kid you not, Sean, I was in my bed one morning, and it must have been about 6 o'clock in the morning, and I hear the screw goat was flapped next door, and I hear the radio go, and he says, rigor mortis. So, you know, I hear that rigor mortis. I think, what the fuck's that rigor mortis? I mean, there's only one thing that can mean. I thought, what's he talking about? So anyway, there's a big activity now. So what he's done, this guy next door, hung himself, Sean. Hung himself, killed himself in the night. Now, this was the M25 rapist. I found out after. His name was John Steed, and he was a big steroid bodybuilding guy who was kidnapping women and doing all this stuff, right? So, you know, that was him. You know, so he killed himself in there. But you know, Sean, I didn't hear one thing, not one. And them walls was paper thin, Sean. But I didn't hear anything in there, didn't feel nothing in there. And yeah, so that was another one, another story, true story.
What do you think pushed him over the edge to end it?
It's a funny thing, really, you know, and I thought about this because it's a very bad ending, right, for anyone, Sean, right, let's be honest, right? And he was taking a bit of abuse down there. But he'd done 10 years, this guy, really. He wasn't new. He'd done 10 years, this guy. So whatever went on down there with different stuff, what it was, he come to the end of it. But he was a Buddhist, like, apparently, and he picked a certain Buddhist date in the diary to do it, whatever that means. I mean, I heard that after, right? So there was some synchronicity to that. It was a certain day, and he'd picked that day, right, you know? So...
sounds like his karma caught up with him. Karma. So next one then, you know, we've had a few people on in relation to the Essex boys, and they've all done very well, the podcasts. You were in the Sky documentary, but you also did personally know Pat Tate, Tony Tucker, Billy Jasper, etc.
Yeah, I knew them. I mean, look, you know, there was a lot of stuff said, obviously, in the Essex murders in the Sky documentary, right? Of course, they cut a lot of it. They interview, you know what it's like in post, Sean. Some of it I didn't agree with because I know, you know, a bit more, you know, and I knew these guys. I knew Steele, you know, I knew Woombs as well. I was away with both of them, so I kind of knew them in prison. I knew Jasper outside. You know, he was shot in the nut, Jasper. This was going back before Billy Jasper, right? You know, when he was kind of around, you had guys like Billy Gale and all these really old school guys, you know, and there was a lot of, what I will say, Sean, about this